Content warning. This video contains a content warning. If you can't personally handle content warnings, please jump to the timecode on the screen so your delicate eyes don't observe a content warning. Content warning. This episode contains discussions of drug use throughout, as well as a simulated scene of actual drug use. Timecodes for that scene are in the description, and I'll also put a disclaimer on screen when we hit that scene. Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 81, What Lies Beneath the Surface. And look, this is going to be a long one, so I've got no preamble today. Let's just jump right in and get things started, because we have a lot to cover in this episode. It's funny, I actually got a comment where someone said, looking forward to this episode where nothing happens. And from my perspective, well, as you'll see, I think there are a lot of lessons we can learn from this episode. So Matt opens the game, and in his opening recap, Matt describes the moment where the party decided the ancient green dragon Raishan should not be allowed to interact with the corpse of the ancient red dragon Thordak. So when it seemed like Raishan was casting a spell on Thordak's corpse to speak with his spirit from beyond the Veil of Death, Vax attacked her and tried to stop her from getting what she wanted. And during this recap, Matt points out the fact that Raishan had made a few unique choices of her own, his words, leading up to that moment. This seems to confirm the thing that we talked about in episode 79, when one of her lightning bolts against Thordak also hit Vax. Matt is either deliberately confirming that she did this on purpose to try to soften up our heroes before a potential fight, or he's simply conceding that the party easily might have read it that way, which means they were potentially justified in feeling like they could not trust her to not turn on them after she did whatever she was going to do with Thordak's body. Vax mentions that Keyleth looks really badly burnt, and she refers to it as karma. She feels really bad for that Durgar she pushed in the lava, because now she realizes that's a bad way to go. I'd completely forgotten about that line, but I love it. It's a great joke. They gather some of Thordak's blood so they can potentially try to track his body. But Keyleth knows she needs the blood of Raishan to really have the best chance of scrying on her, but she didn't bleed much in the tunnel, so she has to sit and wait and watch the layer itself to wait until the volcanic activity in the cave will actually die down. Matt had previously described that the layer actions were starting to subside, but he says it'll take a few more minutes before the room is completely safe. Now, the reason Matt is doing this is because he wants to introduce a new plot element next, and ideally he wants as much of the party present as possible when that happens. Now, he doesn't get the second half of that because his players split the party here. Because while everyone is waiting for the layer actions to fade so they can go loot the horde, they don't end up interacting with what Matt planned to bring to them, because the twins actually go up to the surface to see how the battle's going. They see many Wyvern riders retreating southwest, but there are also still other ground battles playing out throughout the city. The twins are obviously really badly hurt. They both went unconscious a few times. Vex died. But they also agree that they have to go and see if their friends are okay. So they start sneaking out towards the battles. But then they actually see their two friends, Zara and Kasha, rushing their way out of the city and towards the lair. They're hurt, but they're alive. Another fire giant bursts through the doorway and starts to follow them, and Vex calls out on her earring for the others to join them on the surface to help fight. But the giant gets hit with a few crossbow bolts from Jarrett, and 2 bolts of holy energy that knock the giant unconscious, revealing Carrick from Whitestone is also here, and sure enough, Patrick Rothfuss joins them on the set. Everybody, except for Scanlan, goes up to the surface and meets with their allies. Keyleth uses her Skywrite spell to reshape the cloud into the crest of Iman, and as some more soldiers begin to enter the crater, Percy fires his pistol in the air to get their attention and tells them to spread the word that Thordak has been slain. And now the party and their allies can head down into the tunnel, confident that this will help spread the news and end the battle, but this will also keep a bunch of the city's NPCs out of their hair, which is a nice touch. Meanwhile, Scanlan is in the cave with Gilmore, Kima, Pike, and Devosa, aka he's with all the NPCs, but he's off on his own because he wants to get high. He divides his drugs into 3 portions and is about to take one of them when the brass dragon Devosa approaches and asks what he's doing. Scanlan asks for just a moment alone, and Gilmore comes over to bend to the dragon's ear. After all, he's from Marquette, Devosa's from Marquette. Devosa is the protector of Ank'Harel, and also its leader, although it's not entirely clear if Gilmore knows that or not. But either way, this is a big moment for Gilmore. He's meeting a Homeland celebrity. Matt also makes a note that there's some sort of glowing rune on Gilmore's forehead, more on that later. But Gilmore takes the dragon aside so they can speak in their own native tongue together. But then Pike approaches and asks Scanlan what he's doing. He says his drugs are actually something medicinal, and she says she can help with that. She's trained in healing herbs. And he could just lie here, as we'll see later. He has a very good deception score. But instead, he puts the drugs away. That's an interesting moment because, on the one hand, Matt likes to honor his players' choices. If one of them wants to do something, he will usually give them the space to do so. But I bet he's also wondering if now is the time to do this, because they have a lot going on in this session already. Plus, if something goes wrong, they're basically all out of healing resources. Plus, the actual mechanical benefits of Sood aren't necessarily going to be incredibly beneficial in a cooldown session. And finally, I can see the argument that if Ashley were present, she would have Pike step in and ask the same thing. What you doing? Which is what Matt is trying to replicate here. But then, once the lair actions subside and it's actually safe to enter the lair, Pike takes on the responsibility of directing the others on how to handle the lair, forming a perimeter, checking for other dangers, and as she does so when they enter that chamber, Matt says that Scanlan has a moment alone now, if he still wants to do what he was going to do. So Scanlan takes 1/3 of the suit he got from Jarrett and he goes to snort it. Before he does so, Matt jumps in and calls for an intelligence check. Scanlan rolls low, so Matt basically says, "Sure, you think snorting it is a good idea." Scanlan snorts it, and it burns, but otherwise it has no effect. It reminds me of the kids in high school who used to snort, like, sugar or salt when we were hanging out at the Denny's. Maybe they were practicing for later in their life, I have no idea. But I know that there are certain kinds of crystals that do not feel good when they go up your nose. Again, from reputation. And even this is still Matt being very kind to Sam, because it could absolutely be a whole lot worse. There's a whole plot point in Pulp Fiction where one of the characters snorts heroin thinking it's cocaine, and the reaction isn't just, "Ooh, that burns, but I don't get a high." She has a much more severe reaction. So this is still pretty tame, all things being considered. So Scanlan takes another third, puts it in the ancient brass dragon's flute, which is now rusted and no longer useful, and he basically turns it into a pipe. He uses one of the pools of lava to cook it, and then he smokes the suit, and Matt has him roll a Constitution saving throw. He rolls bad, and Matt asks him to roll a d4, and Scanlan gets a 3. Matt describes how Scanlan feels an herbal smell, a head rush, a feeling that reminds him of casting a spell, the desire to cast a spell right now. And then he blacks out. The rest of the party comes down at this point and finds him unconscious with a pipe next to him. Keyleth and Vex check his pockets, but they roll terribly, and so rather than just not finding anything, which doesn't make any sense, he's prone, he's unconscious, it would be very easy to check his body, but instead Scanlan just wakes up before they can find anything on him, which is a good consequence for a low roll in this situation. Now the party has their suspicions, but they can't prove anything. And as for Scanlan, Sam asks Matt if he feels any different, and Matt basically says, "No, your body rejected the drug this time." The party questions Scanlan about the flute, and he claims it was a layer action that went off and knocked him out, although he then realizes that's a term for a game mechanic and instead just calls it a trap that Thordak left for them. There's an insight versus deception roll here, and obviously Sam rolls a 32. Matt says, "No, you don't realize he was trying to do anything illicit." I don't personally love rolls between player characters like this. I don't use them as often as Matt does. But yeah, if they're part of your game, the way they are at Matt's table, then this is a moment where the other players have to honor that die result. Although there's a potential caveat here, which we'll discuss in a minute. So they're prevented from intervening in Scanlan's descent into being on drugs because they don't know it's happening. He has successfully fooled them. And then he changes the subject and confronts Vax about rushing into the situation without his backup. Scanlan has absolutely no problem with trying to kill Raishan. That's not the issue. He just wishes Vax had given them all some notice before kicking things off so they could have been closer and all fought together. But Vax and Vex point out that there wasn't time. The party wasn't that far behind them, but they didn't happen to be next to Raishan at that moment, and Vax couldn't wait for them because he felt he could not let Raishan do what she had come here to do.
Listen. We failed.
I know.
Hard. It doesn't mean it was wrong to try.
That's true. Man, we really did fail, though.
If not now, when? If not us, who?
Well, it's not now, so when?
And it is us.
And
so
what?
And I'm not calling this a failure.
You're not calling this a failure.
I am not calling this a failure.
Well, it is.
We bought time.
No, yeah, we shit the bed on
No,
that.
but
It was a
truly,
complete
here's the
failure.
thing.
2 dragons!
If she had succeeded, if we hadn't attacked her when we did, and she had succeeded in whatever she's about to do with Thordak, you know, we probably would have had to fight a much more powerful Raishan or Thordak again, or whatever the fuck she's
We don't
doing.
know what it was.
Yep.
And I wasn't about to stand back and listen to her Scooby-Doo monologue. I wanted to put an end to it.
What's Scooby-Doo?
Don't know. Folks,
It's an
you
island
should read
far
more.
away in the next campaign.
Listen, I get it. I know why you acted, and I probably would have done the same thing had I been closer, but just next time give us some sort of a heads up, all right? We have a code word and everything.
Holy shit, I'm throwing a dagger!
Jenga, I think it's Jenga.
It doesn't apply to this situation. I'm sorry, you weren't there. She was moving. The only thing I regret is that she got away. I'm sorry, Scanlan.
I'm sorry, too.
At this point, Vax grabs Scanlan by the collar and drags him into another section of the cave, away from everybody else. He unbuckles his armor and reaches in and pulls out a piece of paper and pushes it into Scanlan's hands and says that is in case he died. And he says if Scanlan's gonna die, quote, don't do it with a fucking flute up your ass. Because remember, Vax overheard the conversation Scanlan had with Jarrett when he first asked about drugs. And he just saw the pipe lying next to Scanlan's body. Everyone did, and everyone had their suspicions, but Vax specifically knows what this was. Now, typically this is something I wouldn't be wild about. It is essentially metagaming. Scanlan already rolled his deception check against the party, against Keyleth, and Vax didn't roll, but now he's deciding he saw through the lie. But I will say there are two arguments in favor of this conclusion, and this approach in general. The first is that Vax had a lot more context than the other players did. He saw Scanlan ask for drugs, and they all saw the pipe, so even though Scanlan had a really solid lie for how he got knocked unconscious, sure, that's enough for everyone else to discount the pipe as a misunderstanding, but Vax is still well justified in saying, bullshit, I know you asked for drugs. To paraphrase the words of Travis back when Grog woke up and half his beard was shaved and he immediately accused Vax, we can apply them to this situation where Vax could hypothetically say, let's say I don't know Scanlan took drugs. Let's say I assume. But also, look, I am not personally wild about the fact that Liam unilaterally decided he was watching Scanlan's conversation with Jarrett all the way back in episode 69, I think it was. But in fairness, if he'd been asked to roll for stealth, he would have done incredible, so I'm not sure what would have been gained by asking him to do that. And generally speaking, sometimes this cast is just really bad about allowing other players to have their own private conversations. Especially, I would say, in the first half of this campaign. The whole reason Liam specifically said Vax was pulling Scanlan to a secluded corner in this scene is because he's tried to take people aside for private conversations before, and the whole group has just wound up jumping in after the fact, because, at least in this point in the campaign, they're all kind of bad about that. If they're all in a room together, there is an assumption that they're aware of everything that's being said and done around them. More on that in a minute, actually. But also, Scanlan's trying to start a drug habit. Nobody really knows why. And Vax is trying to be there for him in the way that Scanlan was there for him in his own very dark time. He's trying to pull Scanlan out of whatever funk he's sliding into. And he's also angry at Scanlan. Scanlan seemed to Vax like he had all these answers, but now he's self-medicating and being really unsafe about it. Vax is hurt by this and tries to shake Scanlan out of his dilemma. So he gives Scanlan something to think about. Literally, he gives him the note that he kept inside his armor in case he died, and it is meant for Scanlan to mull it over and think about it. And as Vax storms off, Scanlan reads the note, and it just says, "You were right." This note is essentially a follow-up. It's in conversation with all these dialogues that Vax has had with Scanlan that have helped him better reframe his perspective as he was going through his own crisis. And we leave Scanlan thinking this over, and we will come back to it later in this episode. As Vax returns to the group, Keyleth tells him that the only reason he went into the situation and attacked Raishan at all is because she urged him to do so. She feels like her quest for vengeance was selfish, and she made it about her when it really wasn't. There was a lot more going on than just her desire for revenge. But Vax reassures her that they have no regrets. They charged into the situation because they knew they could not let Raishan get whatever she was going to get from casting that spell on Thordak. Again, that is something we're going to talk about much later in this video. Carrick also assures her that anything she regrets doing just demonstrates that she's a human being like the rest of them. And if she has regrets about how she handled something today, she'll remember them for next time and handle the situation differently. She doesn't need to beat herself up the way that she always does. And as Carrick points out to the group, they survived a fight with an ancient green dragon. They did not do as badly as they feel like they did. I was about to say ancient red dragon. They did both. They survived both. As Percy points out, Raishan actually ran away from them. That's pretty good. At this point, Devosa says their debt is paid. They've gotten the satisfaction that Thordak has been killed, and all they agreed to was a single battle with the dragon, and they can't stay here for long because Ank'Harel has a lot of enemies. Devosa has to protect the city. But as they start to leave, Keyleth asks if they have any advice for the party about where they can start their hunt for the ancient green dragon known as the Diseased Deceiver. If you were looking for a dragon like that, where would you look? Devosa doesn't give them the answer because that's not why Matt introduces NPCs like this. Again, we'll talk about that a lot more later in this video, but Devosa just tells them that with creatures like this, you do not want to wait for them to fight you on their terms. And then they leave. And now it's time to loot the horde. But they're a little bit worried about traps. Grog asks for a show of hands if you have less than 30 hit points. Percy doesn't raise his hands. Keyleth's at 30, but everybody else has their hand up. I don't think Grog has under 30 hit points, but the rest of the party is rough. And this doesn't even count in the NPCs either. They're not doing well. So they take a short rest. Except for Grog. He's impatient, so he starts wandering around exploring the loot, and Matt asks Travis to roll an investigation check. And he doesn't roll half bad. He finds an immovable rod, a huge tapestry, and a small wooden box. And along with a bunch of gold and jewels, but they're not really worried about that right now. That's a later conversation. He pries open the box and finds a small leather pouch inside with what feels like cards in it. And the other players are starting to get very, very worried about what those are, which only gets worse when Matt describes them as 13 tarot-style cards.
How far away is the lava?
Maybe from where you are right now, in this portion, I'd say 25 feet.
Who the hell uses
No,
cards?
Travis!
What?
What are you even doing?
I'm going through the loot. You all are fucking healing and shit. I'm trying to find something useful
Did
here.
you find anything useful?
Laura Bailey manifests it.
That was like the devil on her broad shoulders, Laura Bailey.
A heart plays.
No, as you guys have been resting, to be fair, as you're all sitting there in the tunnel kind of talking, you hear in the distance occasionally, ting, 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 ting. You look in the distance and you see Grog just like rummaging through the loot and throwing
Pretty
shit.
much.
What are you doing?
Well, I'm trying to find stuff. There's a giant rolled up carpet over here.
A carpet?
Well, yeah, I mean, some people call it a telepathy or whatever.
I really like the way Matt handled that moment because Laura was talking to Travis, but he responded in character. That happens all the time. It is not uncommon for these players to sometimes hold on to their accent when they're saying things out of character. But it was clear to Matt that Laura Bailey, the loot goblin, did not necessarily want Travis to destroy a piece of loot. Additionally, it seems like Travis was responding to her as if she had said that in character. So Matt made it clear that they actually could react to what Travis was doing. He's Grog. He's not exactly subtle as he tosses the room. We just talked about how it's difficult for these players to sometimes have moments alone with each other, but as Matt points out, this is something they would notice. It's a nice little bit of GM work there. Well done. But also, you have to ask yourself, if Laura hadn't piped up and said anything right now, he probably would have just thrown those cards in the lava, and a major subplot of this campaign would never have happened. Because then the next thing that happens is Travis decides to pull a card, and the rest of the cast starts freaking out. Travis clearly has no idea what this thing is, and neither does Sam, but a lot of the other players either know about this magic item's reputation in D&D, or in the case of Laura, she knows about this magic item just because it popped up in one of their charity live streams a few years ago, where it led to quite a lot of chaos. She wasn't at the table for that game, but it definitely seems like she either watched the game or heard about it after the fact. Liam tells Travis that this is the most powerful item in the game, and Travis is kind of stunned because it's just a deck of cards. But at this point, he's already said he's pulling one. However, Liam and Laura keep talking about this deck like he could literally destroy the world, and I think that's overstating things a bit. But a deck like this can definitely destroy your game, because if you haven't figured it out by now, this is the deck of many things. Travis pulls a card and shows it to Matt. They're just using ordinary playing cards because it's all they have on set. More on that in a minute. But it doesn't seem like Matt was actually expecting anybody to pull a card today, certainly not before a short rest, and he really wasn't expecting Grog to be the one to find this deck. But the crew digs up some cards for Matt, Travis pulls a card, Matt flips through the book, reads the entry, then flips through the book some more.
You pull the card out, and it looks like this beautiful tarot-like design of what looks like a metallic key that is currently held aloft in space behind what looks like almost like the stars converging into some sort of a pattern in the night sky.
That's good. Stars are nice.
At this point,
Orion wouldn't fuck us.
no,
The
you
constellation. That's not a sword on his belt.
there is.
Then the card disappears, and instead, Grog is now holding a beautiful scimitar. And Grog has just learned a valuable lesson. Pulling cards from this deck is cool and good, and you should do it a lot. And thus, the subplot begins. As a side note, Matt either read the card wrong or looked at the wrong line of the chart in the Dungeon Master's Guide that tells you which card in a playing card deck corresponds to which card in the Deck of Many Things deck, but basically Matt got the card wrong. We know this because people watching on Twitch managed to catch a glimpse of the card when Travis showed it to Matt. It's very briefly on camera. So because it didn't line up with the cards as they're supposed to be in the Dungeon Master's Guide, some people online and concluded, well, Matt just must be using a homebrew version of this item. Don't worry, this is not the actual Deck of Many Things. He's taking it easy on his players. But no, it was honestly just a mistake. And really that's what it should have been. But then Matt overcorrected in the next episode based on feedback from people online, as he was so often prone to doing during this era. But we'll talk about that the next time we talk about another Critical Role episode. But in the meantime, Grog tries to hide the deck from everyone else, ends up rolling a natural 1 on his sleight of hand check, so Matt describes how he accidentally throws it into the middle of the room. Not my favorite way to handle natural 1s and things like that, but again, their table. And certainly works well for the circumstance, because Vex picks it up, the other characters start wondering, what is this deck of cards? They're all rolling Arcana checks now, Percy rolls well enough to figure out what it is, and he's able to reference his own real-world knowledge as a player about what the deck is, but he basically just says, it's a very powerful, very dangerous deck of magical cards. So Vex holds onto it, and when she refuses to give it back to Grog, he's frustrated, but then he goes looking through the loot for another deck of many things. And by the way, fantastic move from Travis. I have seen players argue over who gets which magic item. I've had a few players who I don't play with anymore, not entirely for this reason, but not unrelated. I've had a few players who kind of hoarded every magic item they touched unless they obviously could not use it. They didn't worry about distributing things fairly, they just held on to anything unless it was actually incompatible with them. And so if they happened to get the loot first, it was a whole thing. And sometimes they also might confiscate a magic item from another player, which was really frustrating to that other player. I'm sure the problem player thought they were justified, that this other player character was so wild and dangerous, no rational person would let them keep a powerful magic item, but it also just didn't feel good at the table. So when I see the exact same situation playing out in this game, with, I will admit, a much more dangerous magic item and a much more reckless player character, I'm getting flashbacks to an incident that really harmed the fun in one of my own games, where a magic item was confiscated from a player and they got really frustrated about that. But then Travis doesn't have Grog plan to steal the item back like he did even with the skull hidden in Percy's workshop back in episode 39. He doesn't resent Vex for this. Instead, he goes looking for another identical magic item. Travis knows Grog's not going to find that, but it's a genius move, because it keeps Grog fixated on the magic item he thinks is rightfully his, but it also signals to the rest of the party that he's not about to derail this session or torch Grog's relationship with Vex to try to get it back. It is so smart. Travis is such a good player, it's crazy how well this handles the situation. Anyway, among the loot they also find a pair of elven boots and a well-crafted dwarven warhammer. Vex takes a short rest to check the tapestry and confirms that it's a flying carpet, even bigger than the one they lost. It actually holds more weight now. Look forward to the party using this, I think, once, and then never again. Gilmore occasionally finds things in the hoard that used to belong to him. That is a terrific, fun little detail, and he's the perfect person to do it. It wouldn't make any sense for Lady Kima to do that. The same goes for Jarrett. But Gilmore did have access to valuable things that would obviously be part of the dragon's hoard. In fact, when the party found Gilmore's body in the rubble, his shop had already been raided a few times by people collecting tributes to Thordak. So we know Gilmore's magic items wound up in this hoard. That was already established. So this is a nice way to close the loop on that detail. They don't really find anything else of note, but obviously the entire wealth of the city is here. So Matt just straight up asks them, how much money are you taking? This isn't a question of what's available. This is a question of how much they want to take. They each grab some platinum for themselves and 1,000 platinum for the party fund, and beyond that, they focus on things like gems, especially since those will be easier to carry. They also especially grab any gems that could be useful for the purposes of casting spells. Carrick is just grabbing handfuls of gems and shoving them in his bag, because it's the easiest to carry and convert to cash, and it'll do his own city a whole lot of good. And you might be wondering how all this wealth will impact the economy of these cities that are recovering from these dragon attacks, and the answer is, don't worry, it'll be fine. Civilizations always do great when everyone loses all their money and then it floods back into the economy all at once. It'll be... Shh, don't worry about it. But then there's also the clasp situation. Are they going to set money aside specifically for the clasp? Are they going to just tell the clasp that the dragon is dead? Come get your bag. Percy points out that the clasp will not be interested in bankrupting the city that they do business with, and Grog and Keyleth agree they have way more important things to do than stay here and litigate what happens with these funds. And speaking of which, Keyleth starts looking for blood or scales from Raishan so she can try to scry on her. She finds some and right away uses the scrying eye to cast the spell, since she's basically out of spell slots. And it works. Raishan apparently fails her save, and we talked about this forever ago, but whenever Matt describes them using a scrying spell, he restricts what they're looking at, so when they look at their target, they can only see their target. Even though the spell says you can see with your normal vision, he already describes everything else in the room as blurry or out of focus. It's why they couldn't try to look at the stars when they were chasing Ripley on the boat, because the way he describes the spell, the players don't get that level of detail. But instead, like in exchange for that, he basically shows them the path to their destination. And I think this episode is not only a fantastic example of what it looks like when he does that, because in this next clip, we're gonna see how Matt's narration tells them a lot more about where they're trying to go than you get with the normal spell, rules as written. But as a result of that, as a result of the details he's about to give them, in the back half of this episode, we're gonna see the benefits of this approach as they can actually act upon the intelligence they receive from the spell because of the extra information Matt gives them when he describes the casting of scrying. So I want you to watch this next clip knowing the lesson in advance. Because Matt shows them the path to their destination rather than just letting them see the target in whatever room they're in, he also gives them a lot of information they can work with in order to formulate a plan. Because if they just found themselves seeing her in the room Matt is about to describe, they couldn't do as much with that information. It could potentially be anywhere. But when we add in everything he narrates up until they see that room, that's a lot more really valuable data.
So as you focus, you feel your vision kind of lift up into the dark clouds as the storm is drifting southeast of the city towards where the Wyvern Riders have been escaping. Into the clouds in the dark, the moisture, the rain, you feel the humidity almost oppressive against you, and then you feel your essence being tugged, being pulled rapidly in a direction. Amidst the cloud, you don't know which direction it is, but it's pulled you quickly, and suddenly you emerge from the clouds and you're over ocean. Over ocean, you see in the distance just open waves, no signs of land, just water, and then a singular island. Isolated, distant, far from everything. Your vision suddenly scats upright to the outside of this cavern opening. You see, skips I meant to say, but I figured nothing escapes Laura's mind. She is our resident 13-year-old.
It was me.
It was
that
actually
time.
him. It was him that time.
You're twins, it's fine.
Poopy.
Yes. Skips ahead to the exterior of some sort of a mountain-based cavern that dips deep into the ground in the center of this very, very thick jungle-like terrain. You can see portions of the cavern here have been ruined and broken down, and there appears to be some sort of geothermal activity in the vicinity. Your vision skips again, and you can see a deep series of winding caverns that lead to what looks to be like a stone, a very, very old stone laboratory. You see cages, you see wooden furniture, you see what look to be portions of bookshelves that are toppled over, and out of the blurry peripheral of this one focal point where the spell has taken you, you can see what looks to be, just out of sight, a large, deep red crimson mass that is just resting still. You also see what appear to be, to your other peripheral, two ovoid-like red shapes that are kind of resting in the edge. And there, at one of the bookshelves, you see a woman with long, dark green hair, wounded and bleeding, currently pulling books out of the shelf and opening them and looking through and slamming it closed and throwing it down and pulling another book and going through. The vision recedes and your eyes blink and come back to you, and you're back in the cavern of the lair.
She's not in Whitestone.
She was looking for
She's
the
not
third
Mercer.
book of the trilogy of Patrick Rothfuss. It just it couldn't be found anywhere. Why can't I find this fucking book?
Okay, maybe there's another reason why I want to get the lesson out of the way before we got to the clip itself. They go to break, and when they come back, the players are on the surface and beginning to start a conversation with the military members. Wait a minute. So does that mean we had a time skip? It's actually something this party agreed to do without narrating it in real time? They just allowed a new scene to begin in a new location? Amazing, incredible, I never thought I'd see the day. Anyway, when they get to the surface, Topher Bratoris is there. She's a member of the Tal'Dorei Council, and they left her in Whitestone. But honestly, at this point in the campaign, Matt is not always the best at tracking the NPCs he cares about, and the party does not, which is most of the members of the Tal'Dorei Council. Brom Goldhand supposedly died during the initial attack on Amon, at least according to Gilmore, and then he wound up popping up in a later episode. And it's possible that we can just chalk that up to some confusion on Gilmore's part, but also, sometimes we get a moment like this where Matt does not remember that this NPC didn't come with them, which is fine. The reason I point this out is because it kind of helps remind us that, no, Matt is not playing 4D chess behind the screen. He's just doing his best. He's trying to track everything he can, but sometimes he gets things wrong. Because he's not actually keeping an entire world spinning behind the DM screen. He just makes it seem like he is. It's been, I think, more than a month since the session where they left Whitestone to go to the battle, so Matt just forgot they didn't bring Topher Bratoris with them. But also, Matt has a really good reason to introduce Topher Bratoris right now. The reason Matt put this member of the council right in front of the party is so they can hand off the task of dealing with all the gold. They don't want to babysit another big pile of treasure, and they shouldn't be the ones in charge of that. This is the funny thing about having other NPCs in power that you can hand responsibility off to. Look, I have frequently been very, very critical of the fact that there's these high-level NPCs who you can keep running to with your problems, and they can help you with those problems. That's an idea that I just don't love. Sometimes it's a world-building thing. Part of the reason I'm not wild about Matt Mercer's approach to world building in this specific respect. I like a lot of other ways he handles world building. I made a whole video about that. But in this respect, I don't like that he has lots of different spellcasters and positions of government, not just because it's sort of necessitates a level of magical bureaucracy, I think cheapens the magic of your world, but also because if your campaign setting is full of altruistic, high-level wizards, the players are going to want to turn a lot of their projects and problems over to those people who are in charge and realistically should be the ones dealing with these problems, and that takes away the focus that the players should have on the adventures themselves. However, there's absolutely something to be said for taking a big logistical problem like this and handing it off to some other people you know can handle it instead of you, so you can just go on other D&D adventures. It's not just helpful that Topher Pretorius is a member of the council, it also does help that she's a high-level adventurer. So you get the sense that she could actually handle the situation if it starts to go bad and they wind up looking down the barrel of some sort of riot or a duel with the Clasp. And it is nice to have these other authority figures you've been leaning on for support, specifically in moments like this. Then again, if you're more used to the tradition of D&D where you eventually become nobles yourselves, then the idea would be that you would hand this problem off to somebody who actually does report to you directly, and they basically act as your agent in this situation. And that's not really what's happening here. So this is not the only way to handle a problem like this, but for the story and tone that Matt has constructed, it's one where the players are assumed to set aside a lot of their political responsibilities so they can go on D&D adventures. So within the world that Matt has created, introducing Topher in this scene is a really smart solution to take this logistical problem off their shoulders and keep them adventuring. Speaking of which, our heroes put their heads together and try to figure out what island Keyleth saw in her vision. And Matt allows them to make intelligence checks, but none of them roll high enough to figure it out. Patrick does roll high enough for Carrick to realize that this island would be not to the north. It sounds like it's in the more tropical or maybe even volcanic regions, which are to the south. But then he makes some own deductions all on his own, as Patrick, not as Carrick getting information from Matt. He realizes, okay, she's tossing books around, she's looking for information, so this is not her home. Because presumably she would actually know where she could find whatever she's looking for. It also doesn't exactly seem like it belonged just to Thordak, because he wasn't really the bookish sort, so this probably belonged to a powerful humanoid individual. Given that there are cages in the room, the prior tenant clearly wasn't up to anything good. He was nefarious, and somebody this powerful and this evil, who has the sort of information that the ancient dragons are trying to track down, those people wind up in stories. Whoever's laboratory this was originally would definitely have some sort of reputation. So if you can figure out what area this is, you can probably track down the people who were historically causing problems in that region. Vex asks, is this a necromancer? And he says, well, yeah, she stole a dead dragon. Yeah, Vex is probably right. They're probably looking for an abandoned laboratory of a necromancer. Percy rolls a natural 20 on an Arcana check to try to figure out which notorious necromancers might match these criteria. And that's it, right? That's game over. If somebody rolls a natural 20 to figure out who they're looking for, you just have to tell them exactly who it is, right? Well, don't worry, actually. Matt is going to tell them who they're looking for, but he also does it in a way where they can kind of figure it out themselves before he even finishes saying it. See, Matt tells them that necromancy is basically outlawed. It's more common in Wildmount, but it's still heavily regulated out there. Whoever they're looking for would clearly not be a very regulated individual. They're not doing things within the boundaries of the law. And so he gives them two names. The first is Vecna, and their previous research into the Briarwoods, he says, has indicated that Vecna's origins are likely in Wildmount, which is to the east. The other name is a mage named Opash. He was active in Ank'Harel, or at least in Marquette, to the south, but he was banished out of the country and out to sea. And as soon as he says out to sea, some of the players realize that they are definitely looking for the lair of Opash. They're not 100% certain yet, but at the very least, it's their most promising lead. And that's kind of the perfect way to give that information to your players, because it means they have to find some way to verify this information. And of course, they actually still have to find the island. Rolling a natural 20 didn't give them the coordinates or anything like that. But this is a really solid lead they can explore further. Gilmore's also been thinking about this stuff in the background, and as he pipes in, Matt once again mentions the glowing symbol on his forehead. The party asks him about it, and he admits he's something called a rune child. Some people are just born this way, and they were often sought after for their power, and that didn't always go well for the rune children themselves. So he often keeps this aspect of himself a secret. This ties into something Matt was developing for the Tal'Dorei campaign guide, the new sorceress origin subclass of the rune child. Ultimately, we never really see this plot point revisited in the campaign, because this is the first time Matt is introducing a plot point he doesn't have any intentions of paying off within the campaign, because he's setting up stuff we can do in our own games. Well, it's not entirely true. He kind of did the same thing with the Horn of Orcus. He kind of left it as an open plot point that we could do in our own games if we're running games in Tal'Dorei. And technically, there is another aspect the players are currently dealing with that was really meant to be set up for another campaign, but we'll talk about that a little later in this video. Anyway, Gilmore is also able to identify Travis's new sword. It's a dancing sword. It'll fight alongside you in battle. But then back on topic, Gilmore has never heard of Opash, so he can't really help them with that. The party suggests they could maybe ask Jaman about Opash next time they're in Ankarel, but Keyleth wonders, how long is Raishan even going to stay at this laboratory? If we're talking about the next time we're in Ankarel, she's looking for information at presumably Opash's lair, but once she finds it, she's probably just going to bail. Anyway, they're not sure exactly how they can get there or when, but right now, Keyleth can get them all back to Whitestone tonight so they can regroup and figure out what they're doing next. Carrick tags along with them. He gives some other instructions to the villagers turned soldiers that he brought with him from Westron, instructing them to help keep peace in the city while he's gone. They also make sure to tell War Master Daxio that the clasp deserves generous compensation. Vox Machina could not have gotten to the dragon without the clasp's help. Vax says at the very least they deserve the old status quo, but Carrick reminds Daxio that if you give a group like that some position of power or authority or influence in your city, you can keep an eye on them, which is a shrewd point and one Daxio seems to take to heart. As they walk back to their keep to go back through the tree to in their garden, Matt describes how they pass all these people that know what they did for them, and many of them nod in recognition and thanks. It's a nice way for Vox Machina to be recognized as heroes but not get swarmed with attention so they can keep the session moving. And I think it works because these are soldiers. You can assume they understand decorum and not wanting to waylay the party when they might be off to go do something else important, whereas a crowd of civilians might not be able to control themselves in the same way. But the scene plays because these are military folks. They travel through the tree and wind up back in Whitestone in the early morning, local time. They meet up with Cassandra and say that everyone can stand down regarding the force field. The threat of the dragons is over. Now, they don't get into it right now, but, Raishan's still in the loose, but let's be fair, it's not like the dome was keeping her out anyway. The party would like to speak with Allura, but first, they're going to freshen up a bit. It's been a long day. And first things first, Scanlan pulls Jarrett aside for a private conversation.
You pull Jarrett aside, you get but a few steps away, and he goes, I'm not doing it again.
I know. I just wanted to thank you for your efforts, and it really meant a lot to me, and I'm gonna cast a 8th level modify memory on you.
What? You still have an 8th level spell?
I love it.
You have an 8th level spell left?
Yeah.
The blue same level spell?
Okay. Okay.
I feel bad that he died now.
Is this through the hand cone? Because that's not as subtle.
No, it would not be subtle, so I cannot do the hand count.
That's okay. You roll a 5. So, what do you modify?
When he delivered the Suda to me, I thanked him for it, and I went into I'm implanting this memory in his head. I told him why I needed it so badly, and it was a very sad tale of how a goblin killed my mother, and the image haunts me to this day, and I can't get through a night. I can't function without some sort of sustenance. He felt terrible for me and vowed to get me more, much more. And at that time, I gave him 50 platinum.
Holy shit, you're turning into a drug lord!
Which he finds in his pocket now because I gave it to him.
We have met the enemy! Oh my god!
You're going full
He
Heisenberg.
feels for me.
He is Heisenberg.
Scanlan is the
He is the
one
one that knocks!
I can't believe it.
Fucking doors.
Oh my god!
I broke down, and he's never seen me break down like that.
No, he
his
hasn't.
mind, anyway.
And he kind of stops for a second, and his eyes glaze over, and he kind of blinks for a second. Well, I understand these have been very trying days. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know.
You know how to help.
And you see the look in his eyes that you've seen before, which is I don't do this. I barely know how to do this, and the connections I have.
He's Jesse.
It's going to be hard. And you see this as look, but as opposed to where previously it was, I can't do this anymore. He reaches out, touches your shoulder, and goes, I'll do what I can.
That's all I ask.
Yeah, Mr. Shorthalt, yeah!
The meat man cometh!
Obviously, the cast is making a bunch of Breaking Bad references and calling Sam a drug lord, but he's not becoming a drug lord. He's becoming a drug addict. Those are wildly different things. I get the temptation to still make the Breaking Bad references. It's a great show. But what's happening here is a different thing. And speaking of TV references...
So we were all taking baths, right?
Yeah, you're taking...
Right. And they're like big royal baths, because this is Whitestone?
Yeah, I mean, there's maybe 4 at any given point in time, so you guys still have to kind of take turns.
Excellent.
And prepare.
Is this where we had the cannon?
I take mine
No,
very
that's
quickly
not
Mansion.
and walk in the buck, and I find Percival's bath and silently walk in while he's bathing, and I sit in the bath on the other side and just stare for a minute.
You know you're getting weirder.
You and I are very different.
I would agree. Although again, I'm in a bath at the moment. I'm cut to it. I think I was really working on something.
I didn't think you were
You made me a little off.
so meek. Anyway, I still plan to honor your request, but I want you to know that you are like a brother to me. Now, I have a sister and we fight constantly, so I expect to do that with you.
I hope so.
But I'm glad I have you around still.
Me as well. I like this family. I'd like to keep it.
Okay. Don't say another word.
I
I
really
show him
don't-
my ass and I leave.
As soon as he leaves, I come up from the water and go, oh! I thought he'd never
I was so hoping you were going to do that.
How big are these fucking bathtubs?
They're big bathtubs.
It's so gross. That's like a minute long.
I love you. That was wonderful.
My opinion of you has changed.
This is a reference to the TV show Friends. Laura later admitted that she was even debating whether or not she was going to do this, and if the scene had gone on any longer, she would have abandoned the idea. But then Vax left and she seized her opportunity. And obviously we get one of the most iconic moments of the entire campaign as a result. So, after their baths, the party sits down, starts having breakfast and wine, and they start working on their to-do list. What is everything they need to get done that they haven't accomplished yet? Look into Opash, or go visit Wildmount to look for information about Vecna to see if they can find Raishan. Return the hand to the guild in Ank'Harel, bury ashes in Vasselheim. Obviously they have Hodis the Rakshasa coming after them, as well as the Pit Fiend they slew in the city of Brass, who also wants revenge. But Matt makes Sam roll an Arcana check. He gets higher than 20, and Matt says that any high-ranking devil like the Pit Fiend who was killed by a bunch of random people, that guy would have been stripped of all of his titles and power, demoted, and punished severely for that slight against the Hells. He literally says out loud to the players, that's probably something you don't need to worry about. I alluded to this back when we discussed that fight with the Pit Fiend, but I think Matt realized that this plot point was going to be way too similar to the Rakshasa, so he found an excuse to retcon this scenario, so that even though the Pit Fiend still threatened to come after them, that's not actually going to happen anymore, and they don't need to worry about it. Instead, the only fiend they have to hunt down and kill in the Nine Hells is the one who they've already been dealing with a couple times, and who they are already the most invested in resolving. They've spent, 15 episodes at this point talking about how at some point they have to go to the Nine Hells and kill the Rakshasa. If Matt had now declared that the Rakshasa wasn't something they had to worry about anymore, that would kind of suck. Declaring that they don't have to worry about the Pit Fiend just makes them feel relieved, because that's a storyline most of them didn't even remember was going to come back again. Most of them did not remember he swore vengeance on them and was going to be reborn in the Hells. But now that's not going to happen, and instead of feeling like a plot point has been abandoned that they were invested in, it just takes the pressure off of one thing that was on their list. Now technically Matt could have kept them both, because the mission to go deal with the Rakshasa would bring them to roughly the same place where they would have to deal with the Pit Fiend. They're both located in the Nine Hells, but they might be in different aspects of the Hells. There are 9 of them after all. And even if they were on the same level of hell, they may not be right next to each other. And you know what? Let's just focus on the one villain they've actually dealt with a few times, and Matt has been really setting up throughout the campaign so far. However, speaking of villains that have been set up, Keyleth does point out that the top of the list should be Raishan, because she doesn't think Raishan's just going to sit back and do nothing to them. She's worried that if they don't deal with her right away, Raishan's going to come back and kill them all. And you can't deny that she has a lot of information she could use against them. So right now they seem to have an advantage they can press. Raishan hasn't found whatever she's looking for, she hasn't cured herself, and she doesn't know Vox Machina knows where she is, or at least has a solid guess. Allura sits down with them and they ask about Opash's island. I think they're waiting for her to hit them with a whole bunch of lore, the way that she has so many times before, recalling on all this information that they don't have because they failed their Arcana checks. But instead, Matt does something really smart. He describes how Allura is sitting and thinking about this, and then she asks the party if they remembered the name of the island that Thordak ruled over after he was defeated in Marquette. She doesn't give them any new information, she just connects a single dot for them. She gives them one hint. That's so smart. So they begin scouring their notes, but they're not all the best note takers in the world. They're having a hard time finding it. They don't remember where they learned it, so even the folks who do have it written down don't even know where to look. And Laura asks, wait, would this be something I would remember because it's knowledge relating to dragons, specifically the dragon who killed my mom? And Matt says, okay, that's a good enough reason for him to just tell them the information. That is how they've been using her skill about knowledge about dragons. It does make perfect sense. And it is still not just an NPC sitting down and telling them something. Within the world of the game, it's the players, or at least the player characters, figuring it out. Obviously, it would be nice if, in order to use her ability of recalling dragon information or memories or something like that, she had to, like, spend some sort of resource, like a hope or something like that. I might be working on a whole other video about that and about Daggerheart's experience system and the fact that every time you use one of your experiences, it's like a negotiation with the GM. Keep an eye out for that video in the future. Anyway, Matt tells them that Thordak spent years or decades or centuries, however long it was, rebuilding his influence on the island of Viscan. Patrick asks if a religion check might help him learn anything about Opash, since necromancy's sort of against the natural order of life and death. And Matt says something really interesting. He describes that back in Carrick's old adventuring days, he was dealing with some nasty evil forces on the southern end of Tal'Dorei in the Rife and Mist Peninsula. And in the jungles down there, they found a tomb. And as they explored the tomb and started exploring it, 2 of his companions were killed. They basically withered away into dust, and the rest of their group just fled the tomb. So ever since then, he's been very aware of the power and danger that necromancy holds. So as he's listening to this conversation where they're talking about Raishan and Thordak, it definitely sounds like necromancy is a major part of whatever it is they're discussing. And he can speak from experience to the fact that necromancy is a powerful dark art. He's dealt with it before, and it's nasty business. But he doesn't happen to know anything about Opash specifically. This is such an interesting answer, because in some ways it's kind of a non sequitur, but in another, Matt is essentially using this to heighten the tension and make Patrick and the rest of the party a little bit more aware and conscious of the sort of devastating dangers they might face if they go into the tomb of a necromancer. It reminds me so much of this scene from Mission Impossible 3.
It's all got to do with the rabbit's foot.
Rabbit's foot.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming it's like a code word for something he's about to sell to an unspecified buyer for $850 million, by the way. Or maybe it's not a code word, maybe it's just a really, really expensive bunny appendage.
You have no idea what it is?
It's interesting. I used to have this professor at Oxford, okay, Dr. Wickham. His name was, he was like this massive fat guy, you know, a huge big guy. We used to call him, you know, well, I won't tell you what we used to call him, but he taught biomolecular kinetics and cellular dynamics. And he used to sort of scare the underclassmen with this story about how the world would eventually be eviscerated by technology. You see, it was inevitable that a compound would be created, which he referred to as the anti-god. It was like an accelerated mutator, a sort of, you know, like an unstoppable force of destructive power that would just lay waste to everything, to buildings and parks and streets and children and ice cream parlors, you know? So whenever I see like a rogue organization willing to spend this amount of money on a mystery tech, I always assume it's the anti-god. End of the world kind of stuff, you know? But no, I don't have any idea what it is. I was just speculating.
It's funny because in that scene, we don't technically receive any concrete information about the MacGuffin they were just discussing, the rabbit's foot. Just like how Patrick didn't actually receive any concrete information about Opash. The story we heard is a non sequitur. It's kind of not relevant. But from the perspective of dramatic pacing, it's perfect. Because it heightens the tension, it raises the stakes. And so I think it's really interesting that that's the answer Matt gave. He probably felt like he'd already given enough mythology and lore about Opash and Thordak. He doesn't need to give them more information because he doesn't want to take away the mystique of Opash by summing it all up in a Wikipedia page. So instead he uses this opportunity to make things just a little spookier, a little more mysterious, and a little more dangerous. And I think that's neat. So they discuss what exactly Raishan might be trying to do. She definitely wants information from Thordak's body. She might have already gotten that, but she might also be trying to resurrect him or put her mind inside of his body. To be honest, there are all sorts of necromantic tricks and treats you could get up to if you had access to the laboratory of a necromancer and the body of an ancient red dragon. Also, Vax convinces Carrick to drink the bug juice wine that they got back in Ank'Harel, and he gets truly and properly shit-faced. Then Allura takes a drink, and she's completely fine. But the conversation continues, and in part of the scene we haven't gotten to yet, but 6 minutes later, a little longer for the player characters, but for the players themselves, as they're having an important conversation we'll talk about in a minute, her speech does start to slur. Well played on Matt's part. That's a really fun way to turn it into a callback. But anyway, let's discuss what they're actually discussing. Keyleth and Allura prepare a scrying spell together, I think because they think Allura knows more about the island of Viscon than they do, so they want to leverage her knowledge to help enhance the spell. And they've cast the spell together before, way back in the Pathfinder days, when I think Keyleth didn't even have access to the spell yet, but Matt wanted some way for her to participate in the spell. And here's the thing, this is a spell that takes 10 minutes to cast, but we really never get a sense of what that actually means. And so I really like the way Matt takes a minute when they start actually casting the spell after preparing the space, and he gives some narration for what exactly this ritual looks like.
As you both close your eyes, and you all watch as Allura and Keyleth close their eyes, a moment passes, a second moment, and across the smooth, polished wood table surface of which you've been having breakfast, you watch as the grain begins to shift. Almost these small lines of light blue and white, sparkling, tiny arcane ley lines begin to just curl a circle around the table in the center of where their arms are clutched. You watch as it carves two circles, one smaller one within the other, then they begin to form these various rigid star-like patterns within. And as soon as the 2 points eventually connect in the center, there's a flash, and both Keyleth and Allura open their eyes, but there is no pupil, there is no iris, it is just white.
Creepy.
And they both just fly.
That was the most Brian Blessed talk I've heard. It was amazing.
And Matt says that the island they see is very familiar to Keyleth, because she just saw it in another scrying spell. So if they rest for the night, they can go in the morning, well, I guess it's morning now, they can go in the evening, and deal with Raishan once and for all. Carrick jokes that they should just go right now, but it's clearly a joke. Carrick is just drunk. But Matt, as Allura, does entertain that idea by presenting a choice, and it's one that they're going to debate for the rest of the episode. If you rest and prepare, that gives her a chance to rest and prepare. If you don't rest, she doesn't rest either. And I think this really feels appealing to Vax, who obviously took a lot of damage and lost the ability to use his boots and his wings and his ability to use lay on hands to heal people, but otherwise he didn't lose as many resources as the rest of the party. He has very few spells, Percy and Grog have no spells. Vax is at least very interested in trying to at least follow this line of questioning as far as it will go. Keyleth doesn't have the spell slots to get them there today, but Vax realizes Allura could get them there. She's had a long rest, and she's seen the island. They could get there tonight. I mean, this morning. They could get there right now.
To what end?
The choice is yours.
I have nothing.
But Scanlan, pluses and minuses. She has nothing.
I can't die, Vax. I've already died once today. I can't do it again.
We don't have any healing. If anybody dies, we can't come back.
If we were to go right now, I would almost recommend that Scanlan and Keyleth stay behind, because they would be nothing but targets.
Ooh, how's that feel?
Well, then we won't do that.
Then, which is why we shouldn't go, because if we go, it is the four of us.
Strangely, I agree with Percy.
And if we wait a day, it's six of us. You know, it's at least 6, 7, 8 of us, however many we can bring. But every magic user right now is
tapped.
Allura.
Yeah.
Except for her.
I kind of wanted to bring you in the beginning. Are you willing to come with us?
I think if we go right now, we win, and at least one of us dies. I think if we go tomorrow, we're probably going to win, and probably most of us are going to survive.
Unless she's merely scrounging there.
I think she might be scrounging, but I think if she's scrounging, that's a lot to look through. I think that she thinks she's safe.
Did it look like there was a lot of books there, Keyleth?
There were quite a number, probably 100 at the very least.
I'm on the record as saying that I'm a really big fan of the scenes in Critical Role where the party sits down and tries to figure out a plan. I know it sounds weird, but I genuinely kind of love them. This is another scene I think about all the time. I go back and rewatch it all the time. But it's really interesting to me because there really isn't a great argument for going right now. Or rather, I think the arguments against going right now are so overwhelming that it should shut down the entire debate. But there are essentially two voices leading this cause to go right now. Vax is insistent that they could go right now, and Raishan wouldn't have any of her spells, she couldn't cast her Meteor Swarm, she would be much, much weaker. he almost doesn't seem to be hearing the other players saying they should not go, because he just wants to talk through all the options and see if there's any way they can justify going. Anyone they can bring who has lots of magic and healing spells and all the resources they don't have. Any potions they can scrounge up. On the other hand, Keyleth is much less gung-ho that they should go right now. She wants a long rest, she needs a long rest, so does everyone else, she knows that. And there's really no scenario where she's suggesting they go immediately, but she's trying to figure out a way they can take a rest faster than Raishan will take her own rest. Is there any way they can take like a 6-hour long rest instead of 8? Is there any way Allura can magically watch the island from afar to make sure Raishan doesn't leave while the rest of the cast is sleeping? I think Vax hears all that and reads it as her being in agreement that they should go right now, and she's not really saying that. But what she is worried about is that they're going to miss their window.
Don't you want to be at your best? Don't you want to be some fucking wicked badass from the sky?
Look,
Do you want to limp in?
Right?
Yeah.
Plus, if she's got 100 books to go through, that's going to take more than 2 hours.
She may not.
She needs to rest as well.
She might just be so angry.
She might
that
not be
she's-
fully rested by the time we get there.
I know it feels like an advantage to press, but we were 5 down at one point.
I can't die again.
You can, but it's not advisable.
We sleep, we go tonight.
We sleep, we go tonight. She may spend all of today going through those books and then sleep tonight.
Keyleth, we know what we're asking of you. We're asking you to wait again.
I think in recent events I can wait.
I think one of the reasons I like this scene so much is because of what Grog just said. Again, I really want to shout out the emotional intelligence of Grog, and by extension of Travis himself. I really don't think she was the one pushing them to go tonight. I do think that was mostly Vax/Liam. But Travis is the one who recognizes that this should ultimately be Keyleth's decision because this is her villain. The party looked to Percy to figure out how they were going to handle the Briarwood situation. The party looked to Grog to figure out how they were going to handle the Kevdak situation and the Herd of Storms. Now, even though the situation is leaning in a direction where going right now does not really seem to make a whole lot of sense, Travis can absolutely understand playing a character who wants something that no longer makes sense and isn't rational and is dangerous and might get you killed, but still feels like without it, you don't have a chance of dealing with your main villain. I think Travis is thinking about the Craven Edge situation and remembering how hard it was to convince him to go without that weapon because he wanted to press every advantage he had, even when it was no longer rational. So even though I think the party today has made I'd say just as persuasive an argument as they did when they were trying to get Craven Edge away from Grog, honestly, I think they made a more persuasive argument today than that one was. Travis still wants to protect and respect Keyleth's autonomy to handle the storyline the way she wants to. He still wants to make sure she's in the driver's seat when it comes to how to handle her villain.
Make the call, Keyleth.
We'd better get sleeping, I guess.
Let's go to bed.
Instead of fighting, we're going to sleep.
Well, what do you want, Scanlan?
You can go.
You have been devil's advocate this whole time. I don't want to die again, but she could kill us. What do you want, Scanlan?
I don't want to die.
Then let's sleep.
Then sleep.
I don't want to die either. And I don't want to watch any of you die again.
But if we go right now, you're going to die.
We need your spells to protect us. You're clutch in a fight. And without them, you're kind of just a dude.
Who's very good at becoming a target.
That last moment with Scanlan is going to have some repercussions down the road that the party doesn't realize just yet, but we'll get there soon. But just before Matt ends the game, Vax takes Keyleth to their room, and he uses his dagger to cut the burnt edges off of her hair and give her a shorter haircut that the fan artist will give her for the rest of the story arc, which looks really cute. And as he cuts her hair, he talks about how she's still racked with all this self-doubt in her own abilities to be a leader. And I suspect the reason she feels that way is because she's basically the one who made the judgment call to fight Raishan right after they fought Thordak. She didn't fire the starting gun in that session, but this was still her plan, and it didn't go well. At the end of the last episode, and the beginning of this episode, she was feeling very guilty about that. And I think, rather than talk about that specific topic, Liam instead took this opportunity to, rather than absolving her of her guilt about this specific situation, he's already made that argument earlier in this episode that she shouldn't feel bad about that, but instead, here he focuses on her feelings of inadequacy of leadership, which he feels are perpetuating her guilt about this specific situation. He's already talked to her about this situation, but if she's still dwelling on it, let's expand our problem outwards and focus on why she's feeling that way. He doesn't tell her that she's never made any bad calls or has never made a mistake. That's not true. She'd be the first to say so. Instead, he talks about how she is becoming a great leader and how the rest of them have all this faith in her and they just want her to see it in herself as well. It's a really lovely scene, and it essentially, I think, challenges one of the core concepts of her character, her constant feelings of inadequacy as a leader. She really hasn't made a lot of progress through that character arc, and I think you could make the argument that the reason why is because there hasn't been this big pivotal moment to convince her, as a player or as a character, that she can be a leader. When Grog was dealing with the Craven Edge storyline, there were some major external story beats that were all about challenging Grog to essentially assess his own strength on a more spiritual level rather than a purely physical one, because physical strength was not only sometimes meaningless, but it was also actually dangerous if you treated it like it was more important than anything else was.
Show me your conviction. Where does your strength come from?
When Percy was dealing with his own quest for vengeance, there were some really big pivotal moments of external agents operating in the world that acted as a signal that he can't just go on this endless quest for vengeance because he will cross lines he's not comfortable with, and it will turn him into a monster.
We struck a bargain. I gave you the means for revenge, and you gave me souls to feast upon.
Nothing like that has happened for Keyleth yet. There have been moments where her father talks about how proud he is of her, but even the last time they had a conversation like that, it was complicated by the fact that he was also worried about her, and so it does kind of seem like Keyleth didn't take away the message that Matt was intending from that moment. So here, Liam is essentially offering Marisha a way to reframe where she is in her own character arc. It's time for her to stop waiting for the moments when she magically turns into a leader and stops judging herself for not meeting the standards she set for herself or that her community and her culture has set for her. She needs to start recognizing the incredible woman she already is. It's time to realize that she needs to stop worrying about what might happen if she lets other people down, because the people around her care about her and love her and are absolutely willing to stick by her side. And then we get one of my favorite moments from this episode. This is such a silly little moment, but I love it because they start talking about her short hair and how it looks now.
Does the short thing that kind of work? Does it work with my bone structure? Is the antlers aren't overpowering it, right? The length kind of balanced out this, you know?
Bangs.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
No,
You'll
I
regret
don't
it.
bangs. No bangs.
Every woman I know has at some point in their life warned another woman not to get bangs. Apparently, all women have at some point regretted getting bangs. So for the second time in the episode, the spirit of Laura Bailey appears in the middle of a scene she is not a part of to offer a warning. I think bangs look cute. I think members of Critical Role have gotten bangs that look cute, but I guess it's easy to get them wrong. I have seen so many women have that same knee-jerk reaction to the idea of getting bangs. So, I don't know. It feels very relatable to me, or at least not to me specifically, but it's clear that they are relating to each other about this. This is a very real moment for them. Meanwhile, while the scene is going on, Scanlan is in his own room and he rips Liam's note in half, or Vax's note in half, and burns it, and packs his pipe with his latest dose of sood for the next morning. And it seems like this is the first moment that the other players realize this is real. This is actually a thing Scanlan is doing. Meanwhile, Carrick is noisily sick from the sandcake wine. And finally, Vex formally recruits Allura for the next mission, and that's where they end the game. And they start asking if there's any way Patrick can come back for the next session, and he's definitely thinking about it. He's guest starred twice, and he's never actually seen battle yet. And thankfully, Patrick is going to be with them for the rest of the story arc, although for some of those games, he's going to be with them virtually because he wasn't able to make the trip every time. But we will see him in the next episode, and the next few episodes, in fact. But before we wrap up, I briefly want to talk about Raishan, the ancient green dragon they're about to go slay. Because the players have started getting pretty close to guessing what it is she's doing. They haven't completely hit the nail on the head, but they're definitely in the right ballpark. But what they don't know is that Matt never actually intended for her to be the final boss of this storyline. Matt has since admitted that his goal was to essentially have her ride off into the sunset, and then she would show up again in Campaign 2. And I just think that's kind of hilarious, because I think she's one of the best villains that has ever appeared in any of these campaigns. She is a fantastically hateful and hateable villain. She slaughtered almost the entire population of one of Keyleth's sister tribes. She orchestrated the attack that killed Sovereign Uriel and led to the deaths of countless people in Amon, and in Western, and in Draconia. She indirectly killed Tiberius. She was the power behind the throne for what was, at best, 9/11 times 100 for 3 separate cities. And Matt thought he was going to be able to just let her get away. He thought it was going to be like Spike at the end of Season 2 of Buffy, where the villain comes to a mutual understanding with the party where they both know that if we cross paths in the future, it won't be good for either of them, but for right now, they're willing to work together and deal with this larger threat. And then at the end of the season, they can just both walk away. But the party broke that treaty, because they felt she was just too dangerous. Even if she really was just going to leave them all alone, she's still evil. She's proven that more than enough times. Even if she was being sincere when she said she was going to leave them all alone for the rest of their lives, she would still go on to be a dangerous threat to some other people at some point down the road. Hell, just to prove that point, she was literally going to come up again in the next campaign. She probably wasn't going to be a trusted ally that time. The party does not feel they can ethically allow her to just keep going on her way. They have to kill her off. Even if that wasn't the case, she's done monstrous things to the party themselves, things they cannot just forgive and forget. So the party put her on the to-do list, and then they discovered they actually could go find her and get her right now. They could end this once and for all. But the reason they even want to is because she's such a fantastic bad guy. She's incredibly intelligent, unbelievably powerful, and pretty damn evil. And I can absolutely sympathize. Sometimes you have ideas for how this villain can come back into play in future campaigns or storylines or adventures. You're counting on that happening. Then the players have their own ideas. They can take all the information they've gathered about the villain and all their resources and put together a much better plan than you were ever expecting. But the reason they're motivated to do that, to take control of the situation and wipe out this villain long before you were expecting them to go and do it, is because you essentially did such a good job of making them truly hateable. Ultimately, that made Raishan too evil to survive the campaign. Spike in Buffy Season 2 did a lot of nasty things, but he wasn't the one who did the worst things. He wasn't the power behind the throne. He wasn't secretly more dangerous or powerful than the main villain he teamed up with the heroes to defeat. But Raishan was. Raishan was all those things. She was either indirectly or very directly responsible for all the worst things that have happened in this story arc. As we saw from the last encounter, she is demonstrably smarter and more dangerous than Thordak ever was. And while Thordak did kill the twins' mother, did we ever get the sense that he knew that? If they had told him that he had done that, would he have even remembered that that happened? No, it at best would have gone down like this.
You killed my father. Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are. I'm sorry. I don't remember any of it.
You don't remember?
For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
But Raishan is not like Thordak. The twins' parents were killed in some random act of destruction. Everyone Raishan killed in her quest was very deliberate. She didn't just know that she was responsible for the deaths of the Fire Ashari. She lived among them for years. She knew them. She claimed she liked them just fine. And she was willing to kill all of them for purely selfish reasons. That is so much more vile than what happened to the twins' mother. Unlike Thordak, you can go to Raishan and challenge her on the fact that she killed people who meant a lot, people you cared about. She remembers doing it. She knew who most of them were while she was doing it. She just didn't care about them at all, which means that her death can be satisfying in a way Thordak's really never could be. He represented more of the abstract idea of a monster killing someone in your family. But Raishan's not a monster. She's a villain. And so I think it's really, really... I can't think of another way to phrase it other than to say that it's adorable that Matt ever thought Raishan was going to survive this story arc and just sneak away and no one would come looking for her. That was never going to happen because he did such a good job of making her a bad guy. Whew, and that's it. That's it. We're done. We did it. We made it through this episode.
Not yet.
Okay. What, Odwick?
Well, you've got some more bonus Demystified videos coming soon, right?
Yeah, next week I'm doing a video about Marisha's honey heist.
And here's the thing. I was thinking that maybe, once you've finished going through all the bonus Demystified videos your patrons commissioned you to make, you could start making Demystified videos for Campaign 4.
I'm actually not going to do that, but I do have a good reason why, and I'm happy to talk about it. Odwick, would you mind leaving for this part?
Why?
This is going to be a longer part of the video, and I might have to cut a few takes together, so if you're just a floating PNG, that's going to kind of make it obvious.
Oh, right, of course.
You understand.
Yeah, no, completely, absolutely. Say no more.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. Okay, so I just put out a video talking about the new season of Critical Role that's starting today, if I've timed this right, and I'm really excited to watch Campaign 4, but some people have asked me if I'm going to make Demystified videos for the new campaign, and the answer is no, but not just because of the workload. Yes, if you've been watching this channel for long enough, you know I'm not good at talking about things right after they happen. I don't review books on the weeks they release. I'm not great at syncing up my videos with movies or TV shows I'm talking about in a way that will help me with the SEO, and I want to get better at that next year. But I also like not putting that pressure on myself to make videos at the same pace as somebody who tries to keep up with Critical Role every week. I don't have that in me. It's not compatible with my workflow. But look, there will be times when things will happen on Critical Role in the new campaign that I will want to talk about, and I might make a short or even a full video talking about something I saw in an episode that inspired me, or that I didn't agree with, or that I thought the community reaction to was strange or overstated, things like that. But I'm not going to make demystified videos for every episode of Campaign 4. Not yet. Not until at least the entire campaign has finished. And the reason why is because one of the biggest benefits of my approach when I make a demystified video is that I have all the benefits of this additional information about what was happening behind the scenes. I know everything we have been told about how Matt Mercer was running his game. I can check out interviews when he answered questions about why he made certain choices, where he confessed that a certain villain was supposed to escape and return in a later campaign, for example. I even know where the subplots are going because I've seen the whole storyline play out. So even if there's no interviews I can reference, I can still look for ways Matt is setting up details that are going to pay off a few episodes in advance. When we're all watching a new campaign together, I don't have any of that information yet. So I'm not able to talk about these episodes the way I would like to, where we can essentially poke our heads behind Brennan's screen and see why he might have made certain choices and try to demystify the process. In my videos, I can talk about whether certain plot points came back in the future or were abandoned. I can talk about whether the players correctly guessed an upcoming twist or whether they were surprised. The biggest asset I have when making my demystified videos is the benefit of hindsight. I know where all this is going. So while I am still going to try to keep up with Campaign 4, and I might occasionally make content about it, that does not mean I'm going to make demystified style videos, because those will have to wait until the campaign is over, and we can really benefit from seeing the entire picture. But for those of you who want more demystified videos, you're getting them. I am resuming my weekly demystified starting this week, and next week we're talking about Marisha's first honey heist session. And so if you want to make sure you see that video when it comes out, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you can get notified when I post a new video. Don't forget to like this video and share it with a friend and leave a comment. And if you made it all the way through this video, through this very long video, leave a comment that has the words ice cream in them somewhere. I-C-E-C-R-E-A-M, not I scream, like ice cream. You understand. So that way I'll know you watched the whole video. And if you put in the words I scream, I'll know you didn't watch the whole video. I guess I'll know either way. Anyway, click here to watch my latest demystified video. It was all about Dimension 20 on a bus. That was a very fun video to make, and it's also shorter than this one. Until next time, play fair. And have fun.